Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea, for that wonderful intro. Yeah, big thanks to everyone who showed up. Songtrust, very happy to sponsor this event. Anything that we can do to sort of help educate creators and managers, anyone in the music industry space, is something that we very much look forward to. My name is Max, as you can probably see on the screen. I'm a publishing associate, as Andrea said, at Songtrust. That basically means I spend, I think, 90% of my day talking to artists and managers and lawyers and people who own, small record companies or music publishing companies about publishing in general, how they can set themselves up, make sure they don't miss out on any royalties, and help them get a sort of a better understanding of what is all going on. Like Andrea mentioned, this is going to be a fairly information-dense presentation. We're going to be covering a lot of material, but despite that, take into account, this is a Music Publishing 101. Music publishing deals with copyright law, which is a very sort of like a black hole of information that you can dive infinitely deep into. It does vary from country by country. So if you have a specific situation wherever you might be joining us from, if that's outside of Canada, that doesn't quite align with the information that I'm giving you, it's likely because your country has sort of a separate, different setup from what one could expect in North America, US, Canada, maybe even Europe. But without further ado, I think we can get going. We've done all the housekeeping stuff, questions in the chat. We'll answer them as many as we can at the end. Hopefully I can get to those during the presentation itself, but I think we can get going. Awesome. So apologies to everyone who does have a better understanding of today's of music and of the music publishing world, but we are going to be covering like basic concepts first. This is the agenda right here. We're going to be starting off with discussing sort of what the difference is between a recording and a composition. These are kind of the essential building blocks of knowledge that you need to kind of understand really what's going on. Learn about the different parts of the global publishing system, what organizations exist, what they do, how you interact with them, what they do for you. The metadata, which is increasingly important, has been since we've digitized in the music industry, that these societies use to track down your royalties, pay them out to you. And then what we call the 4 vital steps or 4 pillars that Songtrust has identified that creators need to take in order to make sure that they don't miss out on any royalties going forward and kind of set themselves up to be fully covered. And then, of course, discuss a little bit about how Songtrust was created as sort of a tailor-made solution for independent artists, smaller record labels, smaller publishing companies, managers who are managing a small roster to kind of tackle all these challenges that I'm going to discuss and how we kind of go about doing that. But without further ado, I think we can move on and get started with the actual meat of the presentation here. So we're going to start off with the song itself. Obviously, the most important component of all this, the music. From a legal perspective, what is a song exactly? Well, a song really only comes into existence when the idea that exists in your head or the artist's head for music exits their head and enters what is called a tangible form or is fixed in a tangible form. This can mean a variety of things. A tangible form can be literally you humming a melody into your phone, like that counts as a tangible form, or you writing down a melody on a piece of sheet paper, or having it in your digital audio workstation like FL or Ableton. Recording something on your guitar, anything that can prove that the idea that once existed in your head entered what we can call the real world. That would be a tangible form. And the instant this happens, the instant you fix a song in a tangible form, you are by default the copyright owner and in effect that song's publisher as well. A common misconception is that you have to register the song at a copyright office in order for you to be the copyright owner. That is not in fact the case, at least in most countries. You are automatically the copyright owner. I would, of course, never tell you not to register that song at a copyright office. It does grant you additional legal protections depending on what country you may be in. It's a safe bet to do. But in terms of the bare minimum requirements for you to be able to A, collect royalties from your work, and B, prevent someone else from infringing on your work, it's not strictly necessary. When you create a song and you become its copyright owner and its publisher, you get a certain set of rights. The basic one is the right to reproduce the work, right? To make copies of it, whether digital or CDs or vinyls or cassettes. The right to distribute these copies, right? To sell them, whether digitally or physically. The right to perform the work publicly, right? Concert, stuff like that. Make a derivative work like an edit or a remix of the song. And then to display the work publicly, which kind of sounds the same as perform, but by display is meant really digitally. So on the internet, put it on Spotify, put it on YouTube, put it on essentially wherever you want that's not necessarily a performance. And on the publishing side, whenever your song is used for commercial purposes, you are entitled to earn 3 different types of royalties: mechanical, performance, and microsync. Let's talk a little bit about what these exactly are, how they're generated. A performance royalty, as the name would suggest, is just generated anytime your song is publicly performed. That doesn't necessarily have to just be a concert. That can be on the radio. Radio generates performance royalties. Digital streams generate performance royalties. So Spotify, Apple Music, stuff like that. Restaurants, bars, venues that play music as part of their value offering to their customers have to pay a license in order to be able to do so. Those are also considered performance royalties. So if your song is played at a venue or a bar or a restaurant or a store, that generates a performance royalty for you as well. Mechanical royalties are generated anytime a copy of your song is made, whether physical or digital. So in the good old days, right, a record label, pre-digital, a record label would press CDs, right? And they would have to pay a mechanical royalty to the songwriter of the song they were pressing CDs of. And they would have to pay per song, per CD. If I'm not mistaken, the US mechanical royalty rate is still 9.1 cents per song per CD. Again, that's one of those things that varies from country to country. Every country has a different mechanical royalty rate, basically. An iTunes download, that counts as a copy. An MP3 has been created, you are entitled to a mechanical royalty. Interestingly enough, digital streams on Spotify, Apple Music also generate mechanical royalties because, in effect, for you to be able to listen to a song on your phone through Spotify, Spotify has to send a digital copy of that song to your phone. So streaming generates both performance and mechanical royalties. Microsync is kind of a newer player in this field. They essentially only really came about with internet streaming, internet video streaming. Essentially, a microsync is exactly as it would suggest, a smaller version of a regular sync. So anytime your song is paired with an audio visual work on the internet, so we're talking YouTube, Vimeo, TikTok, Instagram Reels, that'll generate a microsync royalty for you. In effect, microsyncs are really just a combination of performance and mechanical that only applies to internet videos, but they do have a slightly different terminology around them. So those are the royalty types. Moving on, we can discuss perhaps one of the most confusing aspects of this whole puzzle, which is the difference between a composition or the publishing and a recording. And again, apologies to anyone who's already familiar with this division, but it's just something that's important to cover because it does really set up the building block for later concepts. You can think of the composition as the idea of the song, the melody, the chord progression, the lyrics, and the recording is the specific recording of that song in some form. As you might imagine, you can have multiple recordings of the exact same song, right? Maybe I record my version on the piano, Andrea records a version on a guitar. It's the exact same song, same melody, same chords, but it's 2 separate recordings. One of my favorite examples to illustrate this concept really is one that people in the music industry love to bring up. I don't know why. Maybe it's like just something that I've encountered randomly, but it's something that I heard way back in college when I was studying this stuff. And it's the example of I Will Always Love You, one of the most successful recordings of all time, made famous by Whitney Houston. What most people don't know is that the song was actually written by Dolly Parton some 30 years before Whitney Houston actually released her own recording of it. Now, in this example, Dolly Parton is the owner of the composition. She came up with the song. And of course, when she first wrote the song, she, of course, recorded her own version of it 30 years before Whitney Houston. Then years later, Whitney Houston has her own. And now you, of course, have 2 different recordings of the same song. So anytime either recording is played, Dolly Parton, as the original songwriter, is entitled to collect these publishing royalties here on the left. I do want to discuss recording royalties briefly, even though, just to be clear, Songtrust only handles the publishing side of things. These recording royalties are a separate copyright, as you can see here, and are collected differently. So on the recording side, let's say you play Whitney Houston's recording on Spotify. Her record label is going to be paying out Whitney Houston her recording revenues. If you have a distributor, if you have a label deal, they're the ones who are responsible for collecting these for you from Spotify, from Apple Music. Just a quick disclaimer here, recording revenues or recording royalties are not mechanicals. This is a common confusion that I see quite often. They're referred to as mechanicals for some reason. The music industry is kind of like this. They like to have similar sounding things to confuse people. I'm not sure if this is intentional or not. I like to think that it's not, but mechanical royalties are not recording royalties. Then you have these digital performance royalties, which again, same thing as performance royalties, same name, but collected on a different copyright and paid out in a different scenario. Digital performance royalties are essentially royalties that are paid out on the recording, not on the publishing, for internet radio usage. In most other countries, these are referred to as neighboring rights or neighboring royalties. In the US, you have a unique situation. I'm actually not sure if this is the case in Canada, but in the US, regular terrestrial radio doesn't have to pay any royalties on the recording whatsoever. They only have to pay composition or publishing royalties. Internet radio does not benefit from that same exception. They do have to pay a recording royalty, which is paid to SoundExchange in the US. Again, different countries. So for example, in Europe, Europe does not have that distinction. Terrestrial radio also has to pay out recording royalties. These are collected by so-called neighboring rights organizations. If you're joining us from outside of Canada or outside the US, I encourage you to look into what organizations are set up in your country to collect these specifically. They're usually a smaller chunk, especially in the US. Internet radio, obviously nowhere near as popular as terrestrial radio, but SoundExchange is actually free to sign up to. So if you guys haven't, or if your artists haven't signed up, I highly encourage you to do so. Just in case, basically. Costs nothing. So moving on to the publishing side of things, which this is where it gets a little bit more confusing, a little bit foggy. You play Whitney Houston's recording. Oh, there's a bit of a lag, guys, here. I'm sorry. It like skips forward. There we go. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Sorry about that. Technological hiccups always seem to happen. Publishing royalties. Split up, as we saw earlier, really into two batches: performance royalties and mechanical royalties. You play Dolly Parton's, Whitney Houston's recording of I Will Always Love You on Spotify. Those publishing royalties are meant to go to Dolly Parton, and they come in two forms, like I said, performance and mechanical. Performance royalties, as we discussed earlier, generated from streaming, but essentially anytime your song is publicly performed. They are collected by what are called performance rights organizations, or PROs for short, or collective management organizations, CMO for short. Now, what is the distinction between the two, and why do we have two different names for them? Well, in countries where organizations only collect one type of royalty, meaning a performance rights organization only collects performance royalties, they are termed PROs. Notably, the countries where this is the case are US, Canada, and the UK for the most part. However, in most other countries, one society collects both performance and mechanical, and in this case, they are termed collective management organizations. They are used interchangeably, but if someone refers to it as a PRO and really it's a CMO, it's like a negligible difference, but the purpose here is to educate you guys as much as possible, and that's really what the difference is between the two. But they are referred to interchangeably, but technically there is a distinction, and I'm a stickler for detail. In the US and Canada, you've got BMI and ASCAP, which are the two main US ones. There's also CSAC, but that's private, so we don't have to worry about them. And SOCAN, obviously, in Canada, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. They're the ones who are responsible for collecting these performance rights, these performance royalties for artists. They essentially function by acting as like a receptacle for all different people who have to pay for music: restaurants, bars, streaming companies, radio stations, whatever. And then they allow you to access these royalties by becoming a member, affiliating, and then registering your songs with them. They have a registration that matches the royalty that they collected. They can pay you out and you collect your royalties. Now, in most cases, they do this by dividing the royalties into two shares: a writer share and a publisher share. Usually this is a 50-50 split. Again, sorry to throw more confusing information at you guys. In some cases, they will allow you to collect the publisher share, even if you're only affiliated as a writer. In some cases, I recently found out the Austrian CMO, because Austria has a CMO, not a PRO, allows you to allocate whatever percentage you want of your publisher share to the writer share and vice versa. So different societies have different ways of handling this stuff, but the general baseline is when you affiliate as a writer and you register your songs as a writer, you can collect your writer share. However, the publisher share is generally only accessible to you if you also have a publishing entity that represents that share of your works. So what that means is you'd have to affiliate as a writer. then you'd have to create an LLC or a C Corp, a publishing company, and then also affiliate that with the performance rights organization to represent the publisher's share, and you'd be able to collect your publisher's share of the royalties. Again, generally a 50-50 split. There's some exceptions to that. In some cases, you can collect both, even if you're only affiliated as a writer. I think BMI and ASCAP allow you to do this. I'm not sure about SOCAN though. Mechanical royalties function in very much a similar way. Mechanical royalties are collected by societies called mechanical rights organizations or mechanical pay sources, MROs for short. In the US, you have the MLC, which stands for the Mechanical Licensing Collective, the Harry Fox Agency, which stands for, which is HFA. MRI is Music Reports, and in Canada, I think the main one is CIMRA, of course. They function the same way. They act as a receptacle for all different people and different organizations that need to pay royalties for music. You can affiliate with them and register your songs, and then they have a registration, matches the royalty, they can pay you out. In most cases, however, you need a publisher to affiliate on behalf of you to claim those mechanical royalties. In some cases, you can affiliate just as a writer. I know that the MLC allows you to do that. And the HFA used to only accept you if you were a publisher. I do believe now they accept you as a songwriter alone as well. The reason there are 3 different main ones in the US is essentially because they're specialized and collecting for different royalty types. This is, again, an exceptional situation. Most countries just have one society collecting mechanical royalties, or one society collecting performance royalties, or one collecting both. But the MLC was set up specifically to collect from Spotify and Apple Music and digital streaming services, whereas the HFA is still really doing physical collections. Music Reports collects from like TikTok, for example. So if you want it to be fully covered, you'd have to affiliate really with all 3. So the key point about all of this, right, is that, I mean, first, it's a bit of a mess, right? If you want to fully collect your royalties, you have to affiliate as a writer, right? Then you have to create your publishing entity, affiliate your publisher with the performance rights organization, and then take that publisher and affiliate it with a mechanical rights organization or multiple mechanical rights organizations in your country, depending on what your situation is. But layered on top of this is that this is all happening on the local level, right? Each country has their own performance rights organizations and their own mechanical rights organizations that are collecting for streaming activity and plays that happen in their country only, right? So if you wanted to collect from, let's say, Germany, you would have to join the German society. It's called GEMA, G-E-M-A. It's a CMO, so it collects both. And you would have to affiliate with them, typically as a publisher. If you're affiliating with any overseas societies, typically they won't allow you to just affiliate as a writer. You have to do it through a publisher, either your own or someone else's. Register your songs, and then they'd be able to collect you, pay you out your royalties. And you'd have to do this for every country in which your music is being listened to. As you can probably imagine, not really doable, considering in the streaming era, most people who have music on Spotify and Apple Music have listeners from 20, 30 or more different countries. But we can talk a little bit more about that later. I want to move on and talk briefly about the metadata that's all involved in this and the kind of information that these societies are using to track your royalties back to you. Song title, obviously a very important part of this. You need the name of a song. You need to give them the name of your song. If you have any alternate spellings, like, you call your song I Love You, and instead of spelling love, L-O-V-E, you do L0V3, something like that. You would want to include any alternate spellings of your song in the song registration, not just the grammatically correct one. You need your songwriter names, right? Anyone who worked on the song, you'd include their songwriter name and their IPI number. IPI number stands for Interested Parties Information. It's a unique code that gets assigned to every songwriter by their PRO or CMO when they affiliate, right? So you join SOCAN, right? They will assign you your IPI number. IPI numbers are assigned to songwriters as well as publishing companies. So if you were to then go and create your own publishing company and affiliate that with SOCAN, SOCAN would assign your publishing company its own unique IPI number. Both songwriter names and IPI numbers need to be listed on a registration for full accuracy. Confirm splits, really underestimated part of the sort of signing of the registration process. I know a lot of you are managers. I'm sure that a lot of you have bugged your respective clients to sign splits when they work on songs, because at least in my experience, they almost never do. Songwriters are big fans, or artists in general are big fans of verbal agreements, which obviously don't mean jack in the court of law or at PROs or at these societies. essentially confirm splits, who owns what percentage of the song. We do have a split sheet template available on our Songtrust website. So if you're artists, if you guys don't have access to something like that, or you don't know what it's supposed to look like, or if you're artists, or if you want like a quick just download, send it to your artist because he's being lazy about it, you can just find something there on our website. Correct splits are really, really important, and I'll talk a little bit about why in the next slide. But just so you know, this is one of the pieces of information that you need to give over when you register a song. ISWCs, again, I told you, music publishing, music industry in general loves its acronyms, man. ISWC stands for International Standard Musical Work Code. And it's a unique code that gets assigned also by your PRO or CMO and gets assigned to the specific composition, right? So Dolly Parton's composition of I Will Always Love You is assigned an ISWC by the PRO that she signed it up with. ISRC, International Standard Recording Code, is a unique code assigned by your distributor or by your record label to the specific recording, right? So in the example from earlier of I Will Always Love You, there is one ISWC for I Will Always Love You and two unique ISRCs that both link back to the one ISWC, right? So to track this back a little bit, to give you an idea of what the flow of this is, you click a song on Spotify, I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston version. That song has the ISRC embedded in its metadata. The ISRC links back to the ISWC. The ISWC exists on a registration at a society that includes the song title, Dolly Parton, her IPI number, and her share of the song for 100%. And that's how the royalty is essentially tracked back to Dolly Parton and paid out to her. So it's essentially a chain of data, metadata really, that eventually allows Dolly Parton to get played anytime someone plays any recording of her song, right? Not just the two. Obviously, people have re-recorded I Will Always Love You a billion times at this point. So another key point to see here, we're talking about a lot of information, a lot of data, right? A lot of unique, discrete data points on tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of registrations that are getting submitted to these societies constantly, by different publishers, by individual songwriters. So it should come as no surprise that full registration, if any publisher or publishing administrator has a global network to greater or lesser degrees, for your song to be registered and present, fully ingested at all societies in a relatively large global network takes around 6 to 9 months, right? Because they're processing so much information in such a high volume of registrations. And this will be important in the next slide. So why is it important to get all this information right when you register your songs? Because of unallocated royalties. This is kind of the boogeyman of the music publishing world. This is where we get to talk about the big bad guy. You might have heard them referred to as black box royalties. That's kind of the colloquial term for them, but really what they are is unallocated royalties. So to explain this better, I'm just going to walk through a quick scenario. Let's say your song, or you're one of the artists that you manage writes a song with a co-writer, right? It's great. They record it. They upload it to a distributor, let's say CD Baby or TuneCore, whoever. The song enters distribution. It's uploaded to a bunch of digital service providers. People start listening to it. It's a hit. They're getting thousands and thousands of streams on a daily basis. And the royalties generated from these streams are all getting collected on the local level, right? So they've got listeners in Germany. The royalties are going to the German society. They have listeners in Egypt. The royalties are going to the Egyptian society. They have listeners in Canada. They're going to SOCAN and MCPS. You get the idea. For whatever reason, these royalties are staying at these societies and not making their way back to your artist's bank account. Could be a variety of reasons for this, the most common of which, they're not affiliated with the specific society in which those listens happened, and consequently, the place where those royalties are being kept. Even if they are a member, maybe they haven't registered their songs. Even if they have registered their songs, maybe their co-writer registered the songs before them, and at the last minute decide they'd put in a little bit more effort than your songwriter and registered it for a 60-40 split. And then your writer comes along and registers it for a 50-50 split. Now there's two registrations for the same song that are competing with each other with different pieces of information, in which case the society freezes all payments to everyone until the situation is resolved, which requires the submission of split sheets, which is why I made such a big point about it earlier. So we call this a conflict. Whenever two registrations for the same songs exist at the same PRO, they go into conflict. No one gets paid until the conflict is resolved, requires a submission of documentation, usually with signatures on it. So, right, there's a billion reasons why payouts are not making their way back to your artist, right? Maybe you entered the song information in wrong, you entered your songwriter name wrong, you spelt the name wrong of another songwriter, a billion different reasons. The main point is that societies will hold on to this unallocated money for a finite amount of time. We call this the retroactive wait period. Generally, the retroactive wait period lasts around 2 to 3 years. That's a global average. Every society has a different timeline for how long they're going to hold on to this money for. Sometimes it ranges to a couple months. Sometimes it's several years. Sometimes it's not at all, right? Sometimes they will only start paying you your royalties on the day that you registered it and nothing before that. PRS is a notable example of this. This is the UK Performance Rights Organization. Considering how big of a market that is for music listeners, it's kind of weird that they wouldn't do that, but how it is. Now, why is this money inaccessible to you after that retroactive wait period expires? Because what societies do with that pot of money is paid out to publishers that are already affiliated with them by market share. So what does that mean? Let's say Universal Music Publishing was responsible for 30% of SOCAN's income in Q1 of 2022. They're going to take 30% of the unallocated money and pay that out to Universal Music Publishing. And Universal Music Publishing then takes that money and essentially redistributes it internally to its artists or keeps most of it. So in very colloquial terms, what that means is that if you don't have your songs registered and you don't collect your royalties, you're paying for Drake's new BMW, basically. And of course, once that money is paid out to Universal, it is no longer recoupable by you. That's gone. Which is why I stressed previously the 6 to 9 month registration period, because that's cutting into the 2 to 3 year retroactive wait period, right? The registration that you make has to be fully ingested and the royalties accounted for before they can get paid out to you. And that takes time in a lot of cases. And if I'm being perfectly honest, it's mostly due to some incredibly inefficient societies out there. Most societies in countries are given mandates by the government to have the exclusive right to collect these royalties on behalf of artists, which means there's no real competition. So they can kind of get away with being very bad at their job, essentially. And unfortunately, publishers are, at the moment, for now, still kind of trapped in that system. However, there's good news. And this is where I get to talk about how we make sure that this doesn't happen to you or to your artists that you manage. So on the recording side, fairly straightforward. Is your song in distribution? Yes. Do you have a label deal? Do you have a distributor? If the answer is yes, they're taking care of your recording royalties, as we saw earlier. Sound Exchange is something that I just recommend everyone joins because it's free. And obviously the US is a huge market for music. It's free to sign up to. Might as well do it. I've heard that their user interface is trash, but it's something you're going to have. Everyone's user interface is trash. Again, if you're a publicly run company or not, don't really have anyone to compete with. But I highly recommend everyone do it, despite it being somewhat frustrating. On the publishing side, things get a little bit more complicated. For your first step is always going to be to affiliate with the collection society. If one of your songwriters or clients that you manage is not affiliated with the collection society and therefore doesn't have an IPI number, there is 0% chance they're going to collect any royalties. First step is always to affiliate. They have to have an IPI number, and unfortunately, only performance rights organizations or collective management organizations can assign IPI numbers. There's no getting around it. That's step one. Step two is getting some form of publishing representation to represent the publisher's share of their royalties, as well as register those songs internationally with different societies around the world. Now, there are 3 ways to go about this. The first is to just make up your own publishing company. Just create it, create an LLC, create a C Corp, register it with your government, and then take that publishing company that you've now created to represent essentially just your own works, and then affiliate it with as many different societies as you can. Couple of problems with that. The first, very basic, can be pretty expensive. There are affiliation fees that essentially every society charges, and you'd end up having to pay for them yourself every time you go and affiliate your publishing company. It's time consuming. It's essentially a job on top of already having the job of being a musician or the job of being a manager. And in some cases, some countries just straight up won't let you affiliate your own publishing company there. Japan is a very notable example of this. Again, another pretty big market for music. They are not the only ones who are very restrictive about what publishers are allowed to affiliate with their performance rights organization and collective management organizations. But some countries just won't let you do it unless you're a citizen of that country, or unless you have offices in that country, or unless you pay taxes in that country. I mean, there's a series of different reasons. And again, copyright law varies from country to country. So going it your own is admirable, but not recommended. Although in fact, I don't think I've ever seen anyone try to do this by themselves and affiliate with like any country outside of the one that they live in and primarily release their music into. The second option is to try to get a traditional publishing deal. So that means, Universal Music Publishing, Warner, Sony ATV, even smaller ones, essentially try to get into a deal. And then they will essentially take over the job of administering your publishing. They hopefully already have global affiliations, and they can just send out those registrations to the societies that they're affiliated with. It's an attractive option. Getting a publishing deal is something that a lot of songwriters and artists aspire to, kind of like getting a record deal. Although it's increasingly unattractive, especially because it in most cases means that you forfeit your independence, right? When you sign a traditional publishing deal, that publisher now owns your work, either in part or completely. They do this in exchange for an advance, which is nice, right? You get money up front, but let's not forget, an advance is just a loan you have to pay back with interest, so it's not really your money. But yeah, the main drawback is, of course, that you have to give up ownership. Sometimes they'll provide creative services, like, they'll try to get your song recorded by a prominent artist, or they'll try to get you in a room with different songwriters to write a hit, and they'll pursue sync opportunities. There's a lot of advantages to getting a traditional publishing deal, but increasingly, it seems that the trend is towards independence and not giving up ownership of one's work. So it might not be the route that your artist or your client wants to take. And your third option is, of course, to find a publishing administrator, which is where I get to talk about Songtrust, because that's precisely what we are. What is Songtrust? Songtrust is a publishing administrator, and we were set up, we've been around for about a decade now, and we were set up precisely to address this kind of gap in services that artists were requiring, either people who can't really go about collecting their royalties internationally, because they don't have the means to set up their own publishing company and the time to go and affiliate, and people who don't necessarily want to get into a traditional publishing deal because they don't want to give up ownership, or I should have mentioned this, because the publishers don't want to work with them, right? Traditional publishing deals are exclusive. They only want to work with songwriters that they feel like they can make their money back on, which is not most artists, unfortunately. At Songtrust internally, we refer to people with a publishing deal as like the 1% of musicians, because essentially no one gets a publishing deal. Or it's very, very difficult to get one. So you essentially have this huge gap of artists who, through the digitization of the music economy, now no longer had means to collect royalties internationally, which is where most of the royalties were being generated. And so Songtrust was created to kind of address those issues. So I'll just kind of walk through a list of things that we hope to fix. The first is, of course, and the one that's actually personally most important to me, is the barrier to entry problem, which is the fact that most artists don't have access to publishing deals and therefore miss out on a large chunk of their royalties. Songtrust is a platform that's open to anyone. Anyone who owns even a small fractional percentage of a composition or of the publishing can sign up, register their song, and we will register their song globally with our network, collect their royalties, pay them out to them. So to me, access, it was the most important factor that Songtrust solved for. Two, you don't have to go about registering your song multiple times at different societies. You register your song with Songtrust once, we take that registration, we make it globally, and it sort of helps solve for mistakes that you might make when trying to register your song at different societies, because, I mean, if you're registering your song at 20 different places, you're bound to make a mistake on one of the registrations, either write the name wrong or write the title of the song wrong or enter an IPI number of one of your co-writers in the wrong way. It's a mess. Three, global coverage. We do have the largest collection network in music publishing, period. So that includes majors. Because we focus on administration, we don't really offer creative services. We're strictly administrators. That allows us to be essentially the best at our job. We cover 245 plus different countries and territories, several, so many different organizations and societies between all of them. In fact, you can find a full list of the territories and countries that we collect out of on our website. If you're looking at other publishing administrators, because there are some competitors, TuneCore notably is one of them, I highly encourage you to download our list and then compare it to whatever our competitor is saying that they collect out of. And I think you'll find that we kind of blow them out of the water by a good margin. And then finally, ownership, right? This is really, really important part. Obviously, Songtrust does not take any ownership of any of our clients' works. We are strictly administrators. There's a 15% commission that we take. That's 15% commission that we take on royalties collected. But of course, no ownership. Our deal is also on a song-by-song basis, which means that if you only want to register one song with us and then have your catalog, the rest of your catalog with some other publisher, totally fine by us. For that one song, we only retain administrative rights for a year, which is very different from a traditional publishing deal, which usually locks you in for around 3. It's kind of the average. And of course, publishing deals typically want either your whole catalog to be included or whatever all the music that you write within the terms of your deal with them. So that's obviously not the case with Songtrust. Once you join us, you don't have to, you can create an account and not register any songs if you want. I don't know why you would, but that's something that you're allowed to do. So I think the main point that I want to stress here is that going with a publishing administrator like Songtrust gives you a lot more flexibility than signing a traditional publishing deal and obviously trying to go it by yourself. And I think the success of Songtrust really speaks to how much of a pain point this was in the industry, because we currently work with 350,000 different songwriters that are clients of ours. And again, this number is growing essentially every day. I see it grow every day. Between the 350,000 songwriters, we represent 3 million different copyrights, different songs. And this is another important point that I want to stress. 75% increase in royalty collection over 2020. What does that mean? Why is that important? Because of how the digital economy works, you are essentially getting new apps, new services, new platforms that have music at the core of their value offering. And of course, they all need to pay royalties for the music that they earn, for the music that they play on their platform. TikTok is probably the most notable recent example of this. Obviously, the royalty revenues from TikTok didn't exist 5 years ago. And now you suddenly have this massive new platform that is a sort of a key driver for music that, of course, needs to pay for the music that it uses. And having a publisher that looks into that, backs you up on that, negotiates deals with Meta, negotiates deals with platforms like TikTok is, of course, why it's good to have a publisher have your back. And of course, these royalty revenues are going to keep increasing as different digital platforms emerge, especially in developing nations, developing countries that are rapidly digitizing. Cost of data is trending downwards. So I think really, we're really at the beginning of these digital royalties, digital publishing royalties, and the opportunities that are open for them. So of course, having a publisher that will capture those all for you is I would say, a good idea. We're almost done, I promise, and we'll get to your questions right away. I just have some FAQs that I want to answer quickly because they're always good to go through. Can I work with Songtrust if I'm already with a collection society like BMI or ASCAP or SOCAN? Of course you can. Again, that's the first step. We can actually affiliate on your behalf if your client is not already a member. We used to be able to affiliate people with SOCAN. We cannot do that anymore. So if you guys have heard of this before, unfortunately, SOCAN won't let us do that anymore. We can affiliate them with BMI or ASCAP if they're US citizens. If they're international, we can affiliate them with IMRO, I-M-R-O. It's the Irish Collection Society. If you have Songtrust collecting globally for you, it doesn't really matter if the collection society you're a part of isn't in your home country. As long as they give you an IPI number, that's really all it takes. But of course, I mean, if most of you are based in Canada, just join SOCAN on your own account. It's not particularly difficult. I really stress this only because there are certain countries where the PROs, CMOs are either non-existent or essentially non-functional. And so we offer obviously a solution for them to get their IPI number if they can't do it any other way. Can I register with Songtrust if I'm already with SoundExchange? Absolutely. Like we've said earlier, collect on 2 completely different copyrights. Highly encourage you to do both. How long does global registration take? Touched upon this earlier, 6 to 9 months, and quarterly royalty payments following after complete registration. Quick caveat there, you are likely to see payments come in sooner than that 6 to 9 month period. This is just like a maximum timeline. This is like to set expectations basically, because it can take that long. It really can. And how much does it cost to register with Songtrust? Touched upon this earlier as well. It's $100 per writer with a 15% commission on the publisher share. So I mentioned earlier that there is a split between the publisher and the writer share. Writer share is going to get paid out to your client directly from their performance rights organization or collective management organization. We don't touch any of that. It's only on the publisher share that would then flow through Songtrust that the 15% applies. However, on that $100 sign-up fee, because you were so nice to attend this webinar, we are offering a discount code for 25% off. It should be valid until the end of this week, so Sunday. If you are looking to sign up some of your clients or yourself, I highly recommend you take advantage of this 25% off. This is my email address at Songtrust. If you have any questions after this, or perhaps when we go through your questions, I will signal if yours is a bit too specific for something like this. And sometimes I might even need to do research to answer your question properly. I really am learning, still learning things, new things every day about publishing. Just hit me up at this email address and I'll see if I can help you out. But I think with that, we can move on to general Q&A. I didn't check any of the time. How long did that go for? Damn. All right, 40 minutes. That was long.
No, you did well. Thank you so much. I think it was less than 40 minutes. I have a question, which I'm not sure if you answered, you were touching on it, but let's say you did mention that it's a non-exclusive agreement in terms of like your catalog. You don't have to you don't have to do the whole catalog. You can be selective. Let's say that, say your artist starts out totally independent. They want to get started with this stuff. So they register with Songtrust. And then as they grow, maybe they catch the eye of a traditional publisher who, can see a lot of potential with getting them like co-writes and a lot of syncs and that type of stuff. So then they do want to get taken on into that business partnership, traditional publishing deal. How would that work? Like, would there be an overlap? Would they then get all of their registration info from Songtrust, or would they would the new publisher basically have to start again? Like, how does that transfer work?
Gotcha. So assuming that they've registered their entire catalog with Songtrust prior to being approached by a different publisher, thankfully, we're at this point very well known by, any reputable publisher knows of Songtrust, right? So it's not actually uncommon for that to happen, where someone initially signs up with Songtrust to capture their royalty revenue, and then in hopes of getting a traditional publishing deal later on. So whatever deal, in terms of the deal that they negotiate with this new publisher, if they will know that they're a client of Songtrust, the deal will just include a kind of transfer of ownership fee after whatever songs they have registered with Songtrust expire after the 12-month period from day of registration. In terms of the registrations themselves, since Songtrust will have registered all their songs globally with different PROs and MROs around the world, the information they can just probably pull from whatever society they need to, but they would have to remake those registrations themselves to update the publisher info. So essentially what would happen in that case is Songtrust would provide the songwriter with what's called a letter of relinquishment, an LOR, which is an official document that the new publisher would then submit to PROs, MROs, CMOs, that essentially acknowledges that Songtrust is no longer administering this publishing, and that the publisher share can be transferred over to this new registration that this publisher made with themselves as the collecting publisher. In that case, it's not like you have two different registrations, they just get merged, but in favor of the new publisher. Like I said, this is a fairly common occurrence at Songtrust, especially when we sign like a really, really talented producer or something like that ends up getting a publishing deal later down the line. I literally yesterday spoke to someone who had already been approached by publishers and still decided, look, I don't know how long this is going to take. I want to sign up with Songtrust, just get my registrations out there, capture any royalties that I've been missing out on, and then the new publisher can figure it out, essentially. If they really want a client, they'll work around it. So yeah, that's essentially how it would happen. LOR, really important document. If one of your clients are moving from one publisher to another, make sure you get an LOR, because that's going to be essential to making sure that no conflicts are caused with registrations further down the line.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, questions are flowing in now. Let's say, that I have a bunch of music registered, but it's incorrect. So I've got incorrect data on the past releases. How can Songtrust help there? So what would be the process what would be the process, excuse me, for numerous songs listed with one IPI, for example, when there are two writers? How can Songtrust help in that, or can Songtrust help in that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, something that we encounter quite often. One of the few drawbacks of being like an open to anyone platform is that a lot of the times you get people who come along who have maybe made registrations in the past but didn't really know what they were doing. So you get a lot of cases of incomplete registrations or registrations with bad information, or in some cases, just straight up bad faith actors who like register songs and just exclude the person they collaborated on the song with, which is obviously not great. By yourself, you would essentially just have to contact the PRO and try to get that information corrected. They would likely answer you very slowly, and you would essentially have to submit documentation to get that done. The benefit of doing it through Songtrust, right, is what could happen is you can make a competing, let's say someone registered a song inaccurately and wrote your IPI number wrong or omitted it completely on the registration that they made. You could register that song on your own account through Songtrust. Songtrust would make that registration. And when it arrived to the specific PRO where the co-writer had already made an incorrect registration previously, Songtrust would get signaled, right? They'd tell us, hey, we already have a registration for this. The information doesn't match. And in that case, Songtrust would let the client know. The client would then submit the correct information. They would have already done that through their account, the correct IPI number. If the splits are different, again, a split sheet would be required. But essentially, Songtrust would be able to act as a mediator between the society and the client to make sure that the information is processed correctly. Again, it kind of depends on what exactly the problem is, right? So if it's just like a missing IPI number, and the splits are exactly the same, that'll probably just happen automatically if you do it through Songtrust. But yeah, different splits are really the worst of conflicts that you can have, because or miss different splits or just a complete omission of a songwriter, because that requires a submission of split sheets, and unfortunately, more often than not, is rooted in some kind of conflict between the people who worked on the song together, which is bad. But yeah, essentially, in most cases that are not, Songtrust can act as a mediator between you and the society.
Okay, that's great. Amanda is asking, are there any genres that are really championing right now in the publishing world? So what are you seeing in terms of trends?
So many producers, trap, hip hop, rap. That's such a popping space right now, and it has been for the last 10 years, basically. And because of the nature of how those collaborations happen, right? You have a producer that writes a beat for somebody else. It's very, very collaborative space. And these producers, for the most part, don't own any portion of the recording. They only own a portion of the publishing. That's how they make their money. And so they're increasingly, as you know, the music world gets increasingly more knowledgeable about this stuff, they approach people like Songtrust to do their publishing, because typically they, specifically producers, for some reason in the traditional publishing space, are not really acknowledged as real songwriters. Very annoying, considering that most hits are written by producers at this point. Yeah, so they turn to Songtrust to help them out with that. And especially because, I mean, I'll get people who have like 2% of a record that has hundreds of millions of streams because it was sampled. And, you know, a publisher isn't going to want to work with someone who only has like 2% of it, like that. It's not, but Songtrust can offer them a solution to get their money. And if you have 2% of 200 million stream songs, I mean, you're making thousands of dollars. It's not petty cash. So yeah, I would say hip hop, producers in hip hop, trap, rap. Lo-fi is another really big genre for us, because again, lo-fi not really considered lo-fi producers not really considered songwriters by traditional publishers. Again, don't really understand why, especially because in playlisting culture, lo-fi songs can reach tens of millions of streams, which is quite a significant amount of money. And interestingly enough, lo-fi producers almost always own 100% of their works. So they get to keep a lot of money. So yeah, lo-fi producers, electronic musicians for a good part. I mean, we also have like I would say those were the two biggest genres for us right now. But obviously, I mean, it's across the spectrum, really. I mean, we have ambient people who just do ambient music sign up with Songtrust for their royalties. It's kind of crazy how diverse the music ecosystem at Songtrust is.
Totally. That's really great insight, though. Okay, I hope I read this correctly. So Gary is asking, do the receptacles, or the recipients of the royalties that you referred to have to go out and seek the information on who, what has been played? Or are the platforms who play the music legally obliged to report and provide accurate info?
Yeah, so essentially, if I'm understanding that question correctly, you're essentially asking how PROs, MROs, and CMOs know how much of the songs that are registered at them were actually streamed or played across streaming platforms. The answer is yes. Spotify, Apple Music are legally obliged to provide, essentially dump data reports onto these societies that are then meticulously sifted through and the metadata matched to registrations. And that's how this is all tracked. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Music, YouTube Music, whatever, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook, they all have to provide data, data dumps to societies around the world to track the plays of music. The way this is done is admittedly kind of nebulous. And you are on some level reliant on the competency of people working at PROs to sift through this data correctly. And there have been known to be some issues with that. But it's what we got, unfortunately.
Someone is asking you to provide further insight. You mentioned that Songtrust is not able to affiliate with SOCAN on behalf of Canadian songwriters. Can you just elaborate on that? Basically, like she's like, I am a member, and it's like, gotcha, so that's good. But so I just think maybe some people got a bit confused by that one.
Sure. Obviously you can affiliate with SOCAN on your own. That's of course. It's just Songtrust used to have a partnership with SOCAN that allowed people to join SOCAN through the Songtrust sign-up process, as opposed to just doing it directly with SOCAN. We unfortunately can no longer offer that. SOCAN essentially said, nope, we don't want to do that anymore. So now you would just have to do it directly with SOCAN. You can't do it through Songtrust, is what I meant by that. But yeah, you can. I'm not sure if SOCAN allows non-Canadian citizens to join, but if you are Canadian, join SOCAN. Definitely. They're a good society. We like them.
Great. Thank you. I have a question about some of the global collections that you've talked about, and how one option would be that, say I could register my works in France with like SACEM or something, for example. But I know that SOCAN, for example, does have international reciprocal agreements. So can you just maybe, I'm curious how the two compare. I'm curious, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
of course.
What is the benefit if SOCAN is already arguably collecting some of those royalties? That would be great.
So reciprocal agreements are kind of a touchy subject between publishers and PROs, MROs, and CMOs. So some societies have precisely these reciprocal agreements with other countries, other societies, to sort of exchange information about plays that are happening for their clients in the other person's country. There are a couple issues with this. The first is that it's a select few amount of countries. So SOCAN does not collect from, I would imagine, Myanmar or Burma or Malaysia or Indonesia. They probably have a fairly good working relationship with the US societies, right, because of the geographic proximity and political alignment. Maybe with the UK, maybe with some European countries, but essentially the main problem is that they're very, very unreliable. And we try not to be too public when we say that, because these are our partners, right? Like, we're working together with PROs, MROs, CMOs. But there's a reason that publishers exist. And there's a reason that their primary function is to register your songs directly with international societies and not rely on one society to do global collections, because quite frankly, they're bad at it. They're very, very bad at it. Like I mentioned earlier, these are for the most part government mandated organizations that don't really have any competition. They have a monopoly on collecting royalties, which means that they can get away with being bad at their job. And they usually do well locally because that's where their collection structures are best set up. But essentially, when they are collecting abroad through these reciprocal agreements, they are relying on someone across the desk to provide them with accurate data, which is, again, really not, considering that, look, if in the example from France, right? Spotify provides data to SACEM, the French Society for Usage. SACEM then has to parse through that data and then align it with its registrations, and then in some way translate that data to then send to the Canadian Society to then essentially parse through the data on their end and then send the royalties back to Canada, to SOCAN and MCPS, that's the UK one, CIMRA. Sorry, I have so many acronyms like flying around in my head. So you essentially are adding a bunch of steps at each of which something can go wrong or information can go missing, especially when you consider that registrations aren't done accurately and maybe the information here is not the same as the information there and the metadata wasn't entered correctly in this one place. And most artists are relying on the metadata submission to Spotify and Apple Music to go through the distributor, and distributors have different formatting for that. So, I mean, nothing is going to be as reliable as just registering your song directly with that society so that there's literally 1 degree removed from the data and the royalties going from Spotify to the society to you, as opposed to Spotify to the society, then processed, then, SOCAN sends a sheet for the artist that they want to see that they can collect on, and maybe they have to send in a few at a time because this French Society can't process all of them at once. It's a mess. And if what I said to you sounds jumbled and not particularly cohesive, it isn't. It is very jumbled and not particularly cohesive. And if you're skeptical, it's that way by design. I wouldn't blame anyone in the audience here for thinking that this is intentionally confusing and intentionally garbled to ensure that large publishers can collect the largest share of unallocated royalties as they can. That's really the sticking point here. But again, I don't like to point fingers, but I just want to call that out in case someone was thinking that. You're not the only one who is.
Interesting. Okay, so some people are asking about if Songtrust has any deals. Like, are you affiliated with CD Baby?
We actually administer the publishing services.
Okay.
So CD Baby has a pro publishing service that is run by Songtrust. So if you are releasing your music through CD Baby Pro, you are technically a client of ours. You're getting essentially the same services, except with another middleman, which is CD Baby. There's nothing wrong with that, really, if that's what you want to do. I would counsel against it, though, generally speaking. First things first, you don't get access to an actual Songtrust account that you can go into, which has a series of benefits to it. The favorite for me is the royalty dashboard. It's essentially just a big data dump that allows you to sift through where you're collecting, where your royalties are coming from, what country, what royalty types you're getting in terms of the breakdown between performance, mechanical, microsync, what different sources they're coming from. And most importantly, you are less flexible, because if you ever want to change distributor and go to TuneCore, for example, or maybe DistroKid, you would also lose access to your publishing. And even if you did keep some songs in distribution with CD Baby, you would then just have to join Songtrust anyway if you wanted to just distribute through another distributor. So I would recommend, if you already have songs in through CD Baby Pro, leave them, that's fine. But I would recommend going forward to just either use the regular distribution services and then just register your songs with Songtrust on the publishing end, especially also because of the way the pricing works out. If I'm not mistaken, CD Baby's regular distribution is $30 per release and their pro is $60, and you're paying per release, right, for your publishing. So you're paying essentially $30 extra per release. So if you do 4 releases through CD Baby Pro, you've already paid more than you would have to pay in a one-time fee to Songtrust to administer all your music unlimitedly forever. So the pricing also doesn't make sense to me on that end. So I would just recommend set up a Songtrust account, pay the $100 once, and you're good for life.
Cool. Thank you. You actually answered a few questions there, so that worked. Gary's asking, he's wondering about like a back of the envelope estimate for a songwriter slash performer who registers with Songtrust for work that they totally own 100%. Like how many streams would it take of their own performance of the song to generate $100 in royalties, or is this impossible to say?
It's not impossible to say. We actually have a royalty estimator on our website that you can use. A couple of caveats to that. The first is that, so just to answer, why is it not exactly possible to say how many royalties are generated? For a couple of reasons. One, royalty rates change from country to country. Two, royalty rates change from platform to platform. Three, within the platforms, royalty rates change month to month. So Spotify is not paying a uniform royalty rate per stream this month as it will the next or the month before. There's actually a really well built out document that you can find, a PDF on Google that's free that breaks down exactly how Spotify pays out performance, mechanical, and recording royalties. It's a mess. It essentially uses a big pot system, which, I mean, if you don't know what that is, just read the document. It's really, really informative if you're willing to read like 30 pages. But basically the reason it's not possible to get an accurate estimate is because there are so many factors involved. That being said, our royalty estimator simplifies things, kind of. We can track plays throughout all streaming services in the US and Canada only. So by limiting the territorial range, we can give it's still going to be a pretty wide range. Like literally the low end is going to be half as much as the high end of the royalties that you get in your estimate when you use it. You'll see that. So the range is quite large. And again, it's only taking into account activity that happened within the US and Canada. It's not taking account any streaming royalties that might have been generated abroad. For that, we do provide manual estimates, but I would recommend going through the royalty estimator on our website first.
Thank you so much, Max. Thank you for everything.
My pleasure. Was so happy to be here. I hope I got to answer all, if not most of your guys' questions. And yeah, if you have any specific things, hit me up at mhumpert@songtrust.com. Don't forget about the 25% discount code if you guys are looking to get signed up. Only last piece of advice I give to everyone when I do this is just get this done as soon as possible. Honestly, it's like a super big headache that you just want to get out of your way. But yeah,
agreed.
Thank you so much. Thank you to MMF Canada for like letting us do one of these. It's always a pleasure for us to sort of spread the knowledge. And yeah, best of luck to everyone. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you. Thanks, Max. Have a good day, everybody, and we'll chat soon.
Bye, everyone. Best of luck.